Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined today by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko-Cahill, arts and features editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. Recently, a little birdie told us some really interesting and kind of celebratory news. So I'm going to pass along to the listening audience. This is our 2-year, approximately this week, is our 2-year anniversary working together. So right on, guys. You guys have made this incredibly cool for me. So I appreciate you, and I wanted to pass that along.
Likewise, happy anniversary.
Dave. How time flies.
I know. I can't believe it.
What is that, our paper anniversary?
The 2-year.
That would be fitting.
Right?
We have to make special airplanes and fly them to each other's homes or something. Little paper airplanes.
Wait, maybe that's 1. I'll look it up.
2 might be a step up. Cardboard. Well, let's dive right in. Thad, why don't you share with us what is on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, David, we have a nice story from Elaine Weinreb, who's a regular freelancer of ours, that actually dovetails a bit with the story that we talked about last week regarding the decommissioned nuclear reactor, in that it grapples with kind of impacts of sea level rise on the North Coast. And so Elaine's story is looking at specifically at Caltrans' process of trying to figure out how to keep the safety corridor, the stretch of U.S. Highway 101 between Arcata and Eureka, above water, which is going to grow increasingly difficult over the decades to come.
So I found this really fascinating. There's a bunch of interesting little tidbits in there, but then also, like, big picture, it's also quite startling. So one element of this, which I think people would benefit from hearing first, is that our little 101 corridor between Arcata and Eureka here is like ground zero for the impact and effect of sea level rise on the coast of California. It'll affect us first, and that has to get worked into the planning and vision of the roads being opened and maintained. So you can tell us a little bit about the background of what the article covers here.
Yeah, so there's actually, two things, I guess, working against us on that front. One is, as you said, that for a variety of reasons that, to be perfectly honest, I do not understand, Humboldt County is kind of the, as you said, ground zero of where the west coast of the United States is going to see the impacts of sea level rise first. And part of that is that we have the stretch of U.S. Highway 101, which is apparently the major freeway on the West Coast that is the closest to the water. So those two things, as one can imagine, are a bad combination. And so much so that some folks might remember a few years back when the California Coastal Commission held a hearing about these safety corridor improvement projects that Caltrans is now in the midst of getting started, but kind of the Indianola interchange and all of those things to kind of make the safety corridor safer. There was a big question about why Caltrans at that point had not planned these improvements in conjunction with kind of a sea level rise plan. And at the time, kind of the safety corridor, the Caltrans said, give us 10 years to kind of come up with this sea level rise plan. And the Coastal Commission gave them 5. And so currently what's happening is, in the midst of all these safety improvements, Caltrans is looking at a deadline in 2025 to have kind of a comprehensive plan about how it is going to protect that stretch of highway from rising sea level.
So there's a lot of sort of science and data behind all this, but the story, the article kind of highlights just what makes it complicated. So we hear it's going to be a foot or 2 or 3 feet over a time period, 20, 30, 40, 50, what those exact numbers are approximate. But it's already risen some, but that's kind of a given. So we already know that it's happening, but what's in there that kind of explains a little bit how it makes it complicated? Why did they ask for 10 years to come up with a plan of what to do about it?
Yeah, so I think what folks should recognize, first of all, is that in California, especially coastal California, these types of large engineering projects are always really slow moving and really cumbersome. And a big part of the reason for that is, well, there's multiple reasons. First, you have a kind of massive bureaucratic agency like Caltrans that takes a fairly long time to do anything. And so in kind of spitballing solutions and stuff, all these things have kind of multiple layers of bureaucracy that tend to kind of bog things down. But then when it comes to this location specifically, you're talking about a lot of very environmentally sensitive habitat. So you have endangered plants, endangered wildlife that need to be studied and accounted for. And as Elaine kind of goes into great detail about in the story, some of those maybe are a certain type of flower that, blooms for a few weeks a year and is only really identifiable as the specific type of endangered plant when in bloom. And so you can see kind of how that might skew timelines when you're kind of doing an environmental assessment to try to figure out what type of sensitive habitat is there that needs to be protected. But then, with this particular stretch of roadway, you're also, talking about a stretch of property that is impacted by lots of other properties around it. And so, for instance, the city of Arcata is doing the Bay Trail to the north. The city of Eureka and the county of Humboldt are working on the Bay Trail to the south. The way those are constructed absolutely impacts the way water can and cannot flow onto Humboldt County's, US Highway 101. But then there's also a lot of private lands to the east of the freeway. And so they need to negotiate easements. A lot of the tidal gates and things that are currently in dikes that are currently protecting that east side of the roadway from flooding are controlled by other people, either private landowners or utility companies or the county of Humboldt. And so it just creates this morass where it's Caltrans roadway and they're responsible for keeping it open, which, side note, super important that stretch of roadway, remains open for Humboldt County. I think it was, I think the number in the article was that it accommodates 41,000 vehicle trips a day and is absolutely the artery for shipping, goods up and down the coast. But so while Caltrans is responsible for kind of maintaining that, it's impacted by all of these other properties. And so really to find kind of a meaningful, lasting solution, Caltrans needs to work with a lot of stakeholders. So I think it's kind of a perfect storm of things that can slog down a big infrastructure project. In that they're going to have to be really thorough, time-consuming environmental assessments. There's just a lot of people at the table to kind of figure out what the solution is. And I'd add that the two obviously simplest solutions Caltrans at this point has taken off the table. So one would be raising the entire stretch of freeway as kind of a raised causeway, so the sea level could rise, but the highway would remain above it. They say that's unfeasible just because it's cost prohibitive. And then moving the entire freeway inland is similarly, they say, cost prohibitive and also would impact all kinds of private property owners and land and communities on kind of that are currently along Old Arcata Road.
Yeah, there was a reference to how it would violate their equity policy because low-income folks would be impacted along that road too severely. As one thing, one of the impacts that would make that cost prohibitive or not ideal. So the question you sort of read my mind about what's next on this. But one thing that I did notice is that in those projects that were already approved, the acceleration and deceleration lanes, etc., one of the things it said was that they did put in some new bridges there during this improvement, and those bridges are movable or potentially movable. So my question is, do you have a sense of kind of what might come next, and how does moving the bridge might work into that?
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics of that. Yeah. I was actually surprised to read it in Elaine's story, but I think after getting a lot of public input that the Caltrans getting a lot of public input that it needed to kind of account for sea level rise, and some of these, safety improvements, they did incorporate elements in a couple designs, and one of them, like you're talking about, is the new bridges over the slough apparently can be raised up. I don't know exactly how far or how quickly, but I thought that was really interesting. I think that the sense is that this is going to be a massive issue for coastal communities in the coming decades to grapple with and plan. And this is, because of all the things we spoke about earlier about, kind of the roadways susceptibility of flooding, its importance. I think this is kind of going to be ground zero in a sea level rise planning effort, be way beyond Humboldt. I mean, I think that all eyes of California government are going to pretty quickly kind of be on the stretch of roadway. I thought it was really interesting that one of the coastal commissioners, when approving the safety improvements back a few years ago, kind of raised the alarm bell. Actually, I think it was the executive director of the Coastal Commission, but of saying like this is a massive problem, and the state needs to bring like tons of planning resources and financial resources to bear to find solutions to this. And few years later, so far that has not happened. We've had in the interim a pandemic and all kinds of other emergencies, but I suspect that that's kind of the next step, is that the state of California is going to put a priority on sea level rise planning in general, and then really focus on Humboldt County as kind of a litmus test.
Right on. Yeah, it'll be the test case for sure. There's a lot more interesting stuff in the article. We'll leave that to people to check out independently, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation, quite certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just throw in a little tag also that Mark McKenna, a photographer we work with regularly, took some awesome drone shots, some really cool aerial shots of the 101 corridor that really, I think, really drive home just like how close to the water it really is.
Yeah, and on that note, the water will sea level rise here in this spot means water on both sides of the road, because the water table rises. It's not just like the surf. It's water coming from everywhere. So it's going to be a massive endeavor.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for the update on that. And like I said, we'll talk more about it. What else are you covering on the news beat this week?
Yeah, so this week we also have a story about kind of the city of Eureka's seemingly fairly quiet, uncontroversial efforts to usher in a system of police oversight that is really above and beyond anything the North Coast has seen.
It seems really interesting. I know there's multiple steps involved between the city manager's office, an oversight, a new auditing position, independent review. There's a whole set of implications here. But so can you tell us briefly, like this happened, like it's approved, right? They're moving forward with this.
They are moving forward with hiring an independent police auditor, and then the next step I'll get to in a moment. But so what the city basically decided to do is that for a while it's had a what it's called is a citizens advisory board, and so it's a group of folks appointed by the mayor and then approved by the city council, who review police department policies. They review kind of some reports about internal affairs investigations, and then they advise the police chief. And it's been fairly informal. But that's kind of the basis of it. And so Councilman member Katie Moulton back in July decided that the city needed kind of a more robust oversight system. And so they began the process of both looking at how to change that existing advisory board into something that had a little bit more teeth, and not necessarily teeth as in it can discipline officers or something like that, but a bit more of a mandate of accountability and transparency and oversight than its previous incarnation. So they're moving forward with that effort. But then, an issue with those types of boards is they're filled with volunteers who have limited amounts of time, limited amounts of expertise. And the city decided it really wanted something, a system where folks could really dive in and conduct kind of independent investigations, conduct on-the-ground reviews in real time of EPD's internal affairs investigations or its police shooting investigations. And so they decided to go with a model which a number of other cities, including Santa Cruz and Palo Alto, have had in place for quite some time now, where they hire an independent police auditor. And so this is a paid position, and it's somebody who exists kind of solely to have oversight over the department. And so, for instance, the contract, the request for proposals that the city put out, actually mandates that like EPD call out this person when there's a critical incident, when there's a police shooting or an excessive use of force allegation, so that they can be on the scene with investigators. They will have access to not just like the finished internal affairs investigation, but they can actually sit on interviews with citizens and ask their own questions. They can sit on interviews with officers and through kind of the investigating officers, make sure their questions are asked. And then if they feel like, an investigation hasn't been thorough enough, with the permission of the city manager and the city attorney, they can then launch an entirely independent investigation of which EPD is compelled to comply with, making materials available and officers available for interviews. So it's a pretty robust oversight setup that they have going.
This is fantastically progressive, I would say. This is like the next step in terms of some degree of accountability and insight, transparency.
Yeah, I think that police reform advocates, consider kind of the top shelf, an independent body that really does have the power to subpoena records, subpoena officers for testimony, and then also has the power to impose discipline on its own. This is definitely a step shy of that. The board and the auditor will have no independent authority to discipline officers or anything like that. But it's certainly, much more robust than anything the North Coast has seen.
Well, right on. Thanks for the insights on this. I saw that there's January 7th. They're going to be accepting applicants for that position. So I'm sure you'll keep us filled in on any new developments as the situation unfolds.
Definitely will.
Right on. Thanks, Thad. How about you, Jennifer? What is going on the Arts and Features beat this week?
It's turkey time.
All right.
It has happened. I know every year you're like, oh, stories about turkey. I recently dove into a nasty treasure trove of stories about how gross factory farming of turkeys is. And, depending on the stomach you've got, look into it, don't look into it. But I also got a really great chance to talk to Shale Peck-Krause, owner of the Tool Fog Farms. I actually was on the phone with that and I was like, is anybody here like raising their own turkeys? Is anybody like raising local turkeys? And he was like, in fact, yes. And he pointed me to this farm in the Arcata Bottoms where Peck-Krause is running like go look at the Instagram for Tool Fog Farms. Animals that are both adorable and delicious looking. Everything from ducks, cows, goats, chickens, sheep, pigs, a lot of pigs, and and bees. There's honey. So yeah, the whole food web is happening over there. And I think previously they had geese, but they've also got, surprise, surprise, turkeys. And for those of you who love a small batch, we're looking at a harvest this year of somewhere between 25 and 30 turkeys.
Oh, wow.
And the difference between how these turkeys are raised and how your average butterball that's right now sitting like a pile of boulders in the supermarket. And, I've eaten my share of big frozen butterballs over the years. But the difference in how they're raised is pretty phenomenal. And some of that has to do with Shale Peck-Krause. So they were studying all kinds of alternative farming methods and whatnot at HSU. And as a vegan, who knew? I did not expect this. I did not expect the person who's raising the turkeys for your Thanksgiving dinner to be a vegan. But in fact, they were vegan for a long time before at some point their partner had issues with chronic hangriness. And and as a person who has tested the waters, I am right there. So they ended up going back to meat. And in researching the best and most ethical way to go back to meat, because I think it's fair to say that they were kind of environmental and ethical vegans in the sense that it was important for them to have a way to get protein and whatnot ethically. And it turns out that, good news, cows in Humboldt, grass-fed local beef is your best bet for getting protein, according to Peck-Krause. Wow. Between the small amount of their carbon footprint is pretty small in terms of fossil fuels required to ship the animals, bring them feed, et cetera, because they're eating grass. And they have pretty happy lives. They're certainly not in giant dirt feedlots.
Right.
So, yeah, I know when you drive by those, you're just like, I'm sorry for that burger. I'm so sorry. But likewise, the turkeys, after Pet Krause got in on a poultry farm, raising eggs and fryers and stuff, they really found that people were willing to pay like double the amount and more for animals that had a happier life, that were going to, have less impact on the planet, and also, to be honest, be tastier. I have, in asking about the kinds of turkeys, because they raise heirloom turkeys, they're a little different from the broad-breasted turkeys that you normally see in the supermarket. And the reason for that is they are, they're able to get them without using factory chicks. So they're all naturally just breeding and, doing what turkeys do. And eating grass and wandering around. And it's not so much the breed that makes a difference in how they taste, but the fact that they wander around, eat grass, eat bugs and worms and stuff out of the ground, and move around in sunlight, unlike most of the factory farm birds that are, many of them, beakless and largely indoors and, in the dark. The turkeys evidently get a little more sunshine, but likely on dirt lots, not in beautiful green Humboldt pastures. So if you want to eat a bird that has lived the life that you imagined your dog that went to live on a farm when you were a kid, that life, these are the birds. However, Pet Krause is probably getting out of the turkey business, partly because the price of supplemental feed, they can't live on grass alone, unlike geese. The price of feed has gone up. It has, in fact, I believe, doubled in the last couple of years. And that's been really hard, especially for birds like these that require more feed per pound. They don't fatten up the way that a butterball does. And so it's likely, between that and the lack of availability of a machine plucker, it's going to probably mean this is the last batch, the last harvest of turkeys. And it was interesting to learn about, and it was interesting to also hear that they're not super sad to see the turkeys go.
Oops.
As much as they regret not being able to give people, locally bred and, raised and ethically raised animals, turkeys apparently kind of suck. They are. I asked them, I was like, so are they really stupid? And they were like, well, the other day I watched my duck walk around a fence and I thought, yeah, the turkey couldn't do that. And I was like, I think we're ready to say that's dumb. And apparently once a flock of them surrounded Pet Krause's 3-year-old daughter, and one lunged, quote, like a velociraptor, and attacked her with its crazy talons, which not great, but you know what? It makes me feel a little bit better about eating turkeys, knowing that if I were smaller than them, they would 100% try and take me down like it's Jurassic Park. Sure. But yeah, it was sort of funny to hear them talk about, like, they love the pigs, they love the sheeps, but not so much with the turkeys. They're a little, yeah.
It's pretty wild that the poor daughter, I guess, got the belly slashed by the lunging turkey.
Yeah.
They're vicious.
Herding turkeys is not for the meek, apparently. And, I mean, they're delicious, right? I mean, I'm sorry. And what if these are more delicious? I haven't had one of Toolfog Farms turkeys, but I read a wonderful description of a similarly farmed turkey that was darker and silkier meat. And it's not cheap, mind you. Last year, the birds went for something like $10 a pound. And this year, because of the cost of feed, they're probably going to go closer to $15. And you say to yourself, oh my God, that's an insane amount for turkey. Is it though? Because if you've ever had a wonderful piece of like Wagyu beef, and I speak not of the Wagyu breed, but of the breeding methods that are used in Japan, where they're massaged and marbly, and it looks like you're looking at a slice of, strawberry ice cream cake. It's very sort of pale. And when you've eaten that, you're like, is this even beef? What am I doing? The difference in taste, you have to think about it like you're getting a different meat. You have to think about it as if like, this is Dungeness crab as opposed to, say, imitation crab, or as opposed to some tilapia, right? You have to consider the effect that the raising has on it.
Well, right on. I am totally convinced. Thank you, Jennifer, for covering this. There's more in the article. Check it out. Shout out to Shale and Tool Fog Farm for everything that they do. Hopefully we get to taste it someday. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but we'll try. That's about it for us this week. Thad and Jennifer, thank you both so much. We appreciate you guys. North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up. Also available online anytime. Stay informed, stay safe, and until next week, take care.
Happy second anniversary.
Right on.